New York's infamous Blue Note era comes to Mars Hill January 24th for a special one-night-only concert at Mars Landing Galleries. Civil Disobedience is a project bowing to the politically conscious underground jazz of 1960s New York City. You'll hear music from progressive composers such as Bobby Hutcherson, Jackie McLean, Stanley Cowell, Howard Land, Joe Chambers, and James Spaulding. Much of their music wasn't released on record till decades later, and you can hear New York musicians performing it live January 24th. Seating is intimate and limited. For tickets and details, go to marslandinggalleries.com.
وفي غزة وفي كل مكان يا رب العالمين كلهم ناصرا ومعينا اللهم كن لهم ولا تكن عليهم وانكر لهم ولا تنكر عليهم.
This is a Friday afternoon prayer service at the Islamic Center of Asheville. There are close to 200 men and a handful of boys on their knees and elbows, heads bowed, filling nearly every square inch of carpet. Imam Nasser Ostah is delivering the khutbah in both Arabic and English, alternating between the two.
So brothers and sisters, take care about your tongues, about your thoughts, about your sayings, actions, when you're talking about the people. There is a day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
This is The Overlook with Matt Peiken, a podcast about the news, arts, issues, and trends of Asheville, North Carolina. Since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are on the rise across the United States. That inspired me to reach out to leaders of the Islamic Center of Asheville and two of Asheville's Jewish synagogues. I'm devoting this week's episodes to those conversations. Today, I speak with Nasser Ostah, who moved from Jordan a little over a year ago to become the Imam of the Islamic Center of Asheville. Joining us is longtime center member and community leader Khalid Bashir.
People who are literate, who have common sense, who has a little bit of a just heart, who are not biased against Muslims without any reason. If they read about the history of Palestine, if they educate themselves and they look at the events, what's been going on 75 years, and how many Palestinians have died and how many Israelis have died, they would come to the right conclusion by themselves.
From both the Islamic and Jewish angles, I wanted to understand their local histories and ask how their congregations are processing the war. I also wanted to learn about any incidents of vocal or violent blowback in their directions and ask about any roles their congregations can play to make differences in Asheville and beyond. I began our conversation by asking about the founding of the Islamic Center of Asheville. Khalid Bashir is first to speak.
So the Islamic Center of Asheville has been here in some shape and form since the mid-1980s. But this particular center was built in around 2005.
So tell me, how many imams in your time here have been part of this center? Are imams brought here from the Middle East regularly? And
No. Most of the time we have had imams from here, but we have had some imams which came and helped us out. But mostly we've been just volunteer imams have been in this center.
Give me a sense of what the population is here. How large is your congregation?
So we don't keep census. And usually like this Friday today, this is our biggest congregational prayers once a week on Fridays. And I think we might have 100, 125 to 150 families in the Asheville area. But we do catch people from Brevard and from Hendersonville because there is no Islamic center in around the 40, 50 mile radius.
Really? So probably the closest might be in like Greenville,
Johnson City on the west, and then Hickory maybe.
How long have you lived in Asheville?
About 23 years.
Where did you move here from?
Chicago.
Yeah. Tell me, what was life like for you in your faith in Chicago, and what was it like for you coming to the Appalachian South? I imagine it must have been very different.
Obviously, Chicago is more cosmopolitan, bigger place, a lot of Muslims, more culture, more history there. This has been a smaller place, but the smaller places have their advantages too. One is that you get to know everybody. For example, in this center, I know most of the people who come and go, and they're more friendly, more involved. So that's the advantage of a smaller community, is that you get to know everybody and you're involved much more than a bigger center where there's just too many people.
But I also imagine when you're in a bigger center in a place like Chicago, there are so many more practicing in your faith that you probably feel like you're part of a large community. I would imagine here, and correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't that many practicing the Islamic faith and practicing Muslims.
I mean, that's the biggest difference. If you have more people to know, more people to meet, more people to socialize, which could be a challenge in a smaller community like this.
So tell me, Imam, coming from Jordan, was this your first assignment, first time being in the United States, leading a congregation?
Actually, as an imam, as a contract for work, I had been here in America for a visit. I went to Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay.
I have many friends there, but as a volunteer with them in their mosques there in Memphis. But I told you, as with the contract, this is the first time, for me here in America.
Were you practicing as an imam in Jordan?
Yes, actually, yes. I used to be as an imam for more than 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yes. I have a master's degree in Islamic teachings, from the universities there in Jordan.
I imagine it was a culture shift for you, as well as maybe even a shift in how faith is practiced when you're in Jordan, in the heart of Islamic faith, in the heart of Islamic teachings and practice. What were your biggest adjustments, or what were your biggest surprises coming to the United States to lead a congregation here? What's different?
Actually, our belief in Islam is a universal religion. So you can practice your religion everywhere and anywhere and every time. Of course, the practice in Jordan, all the community there, the majority, I'm talking about 99%, they are Muslims, so you can find all practices around you in mosques, in the streets, houses, neighbors, friends, all of these things. Yes, I found this gap to come here, but we still humans. So the humanity you can treat with anyone around you as neighbors, especially here in Asheville, I feel the good persons, peacefully, environment. So actually my treatments with the people, it's very nice. And I can practice all of my Islamic teachings with free.
It's interesting to me. I noticed you were speaking both in Arabic and in English. Obviously, you don't have to do that when you're in Jordan. And you mentioned that there's mosques everywhere in Jordan. Tell me if I'm wrong in this. When you're in Jordan, your faith is infused in your life all the time. And you have certain prayer times, but you live your life in faith. It has to be somewhat differently than here, where there are prescribed times for prayer, but just general life out in Asheville is just so different. It's not led outwardly by faith. Am I wrong in that?
Actually, I'm focusing in my religion here more. Why? Because now it's different. You need to look too much about your practice. Is it right or wrong? You are now walking with the habits here or not. Especially there's many people, they are against your practicing. But it's nice to always looking about your faith and your practice. Is it right or wrong? We have, I think, all of us as Muslims to look about these things. So it's more related with our mosque, with our Islamic Center, with our brothers and sisters here around us, to look carefully about your practice. Yeah, because in my country, it's like a habit. Even we are doing all of our practice like a habit. So sometimes you're missing the taste. Here, no, you will find even the taste, because you are knowing do your practice, and there's many environment. It's not like your Islamic teachings, but as a humanity, it's close.
When you mention a test, what do you mean?
A test, which means you are trying to looking about your faith in your heart. Is it still or increase or decrease? Why? As I told you, there's many habits around you, many practicing around you. It's not from Islam. Not from Islam. So I still
doing my teachings correctly or not. But what is one of the best things here, to find everything around you didn't push you away from your religion.
Okay.
Because, as I told you, there's many neighbors. Alhamdulillah, thanks to God, I found many good relationships with the community here, even from non-Muslims. And this connecting, actually, it's improved my skills in many things here. And this has pushed me forward to catch my religion and my teachings more and more.
What Imam is saying is that since it is such a different environment, then you have to really safeguard your practices much more than when you are back home, because that over there it's a habit. Everything is accordingly. But here there are so many distractions and there are so many other things and possibilities and other things, but you have to really work a little bit harder and you have to strive to do the right things or to practice your religion.
Talk about that a little more in terms of safeguarding your practices. What sorts of outside environments or elements challenge your practices, and what do you have to safeguard against?
But safeguard against, most of the people are busy with their lives. They're not into their religions, for example. Everybody is busy with life, party, shopping.
Their phones,
their
screens.
Phones.
Right?
I think phone is everywhere. But for a person who practices, there are a lot of distractions. There's other cultures.
Imam, is that what you were speaking to a little bit, that in Jordan there aren't as many distractions because faith is more central to life there? Is that what you were alluding to?
Actually, distractions everywhere.
Okay.
Even our communities, not all the people actually have the commitment about their religion. There is a lot of distractions. They take them away from their practicing. Not all Muslims at what Islam ordered to do. They sometimes or many times leaving their teachings, their practicing from Islam. Here, the distractions, I think, close, but in another way, in another shape, in another version of copies. But still, there's many distractions, and this is make me as a Muslim to looking more and more about my faith and even my teachings and practicing in my religion.
Now, faith is practiced very individually. It's a very personal thing. You've lived here a long time. We are in a very Christian environment here. Lots of churches, Catholic, Baptist, lots of different elements of the Christian faith. Does that challenge at all living and practicing as a Muslim?
I did not find it different. I don't think the churches or the Christians are coming and telling us not to practice your religion or trying to create obstructions for us. We have not experienced any such thing. I think we are more free to practice. I think it's easy. The 9/11 changed few things, and then this Palestinian war has changed few things, and people a little bit more aggressive. But I think it has not reached a level where you feel unsafe on the street or at other things. I don't think it has gone there, but will it go there? We don't know.
I was going to ask about that. You mentioned 9/11. You alluded to that, and also the current conflict happening in Israel and Gaza. Have you or your congregation reported any sort of anti-Islamic sentiments, anything that's happened within your population here that has concerned anybody that they've come to you with?
I think at individual levels, there were a couple of reports of people saying something, and I don't have the exact details, but there were a few. Not a very common thing.
So have you spoken to this in your sermons? Do you call it a sermon, by the way? I want to use the proper term. Is khutbah?
Khutbah, yeah.
Khutbah.
It's sermon, yes. Khutbah in Arabic.
So have you addressed this? Obviously, it's a world conflict. It's happening there, but it affects everybody. Is this something you've talked about in your khutbah?
Actually, our sermon, it's not news, it's not social media. Our sermon in Islam, it's really to redirect, to rectify the society, individually or a group or all of the common society for us. So we don't make our sermon, our khutbah, just like a news report. Yeah, just you need to know blah, 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 blah. No. What we have to do upon all of these things happening around us, politic, economic, socialist, all of these things, we need to rectify the people. What is the right opinions in Islam, the teachings, the right teachings from Islam that will redirect and rectify all of your behaviors and morals with all of these situations. This is actually our turns and our tasks, missions here as a Muslim leader, as an imam. And all of us like this. Just if there's some problems and there's some bad actions from somebody or a person, no, come on. You have to rectify your action because it's incorrect. Or this is correct, or go ahead. I encourage him.
You just said something that made me think about what you talked about today. You talked a lot about don't talk bad about your neighbor. What prompted today's sermon or khutbah? What prompted that today? Was there any specific event that happened that inspired this, or is this just in general you wanted to talk about it?
Okay, as I told you, our sermon or our khutbah, actually it's not about what people want, but about what people need to know. Now we have a lot of things around us, like what our brother said about Palestinian now, and everything's around us happening. We listening from many people, Muslims or non-Muslims, sometimes bad reactions or good reactions. So what we have to do, what we have to say, what is the correct thing must be do during all of these actions, events around us. This is actually the subject I talked about it this day.
Do you consult with other imams and clerics about just how to interpret the Quran in these instances, or do you really go on your own from what you've learned in your teachings?
Actually, as I told you, I'm fresh here in U.S. I now didn't have this opportunity to talk with other imams, so the majority of my khutbahs from me. I prepare it and I try to put inside it what is the important and what is the most important to talk with the people. Around the world, yes, there's many conferences between imams, between scholars to talk about all of the events around the world. This is concern all Muslims around the world, yeah.
You said that you've heard talk, at least from a few people, maybe that there might have been some anti-Islamic sentiments, but nothing major that has happened. Have you and your fellow congregants just talked about what's happening and how to respond should there be any larger sentiment about, well, the Islamic community should do this or they should respond a certain way?
I think we had a session here 2 weeks ago. We did try to educate. We invited a lot of people, Muslims and non-Muslims, to learn about the plight of the Palestinian people and what's going on. And we also participated a lot of people participated in the pro-Palestinian march in downtown. So I think the most important thing for us is not to tell people what's right and wrong, but it's to educate people. People who are literate, who have common sense, who has a little bit of a just heart, who are not biased, who are not biased against Muslims without any reason or not. If they read about the history of Palestine, if they educate themselves and they look at the events, what's been going on 75 years, and how many Palestinians have died and how many Israelis have died, they would come to the right conclusion by themselves. I don't have to tell them anything. There is material, there is true education, there are books, there are movies, there is history which will teach anybody who is keen to learn about Palestinian issues objectively. It doesn't have to be subjective from me or from the imam. They have to educate themselves and they'll come to the right conclusion themselves.
When you're talking about educating, are you talking about just
historical education? What is the plight of the people? Because some of these Palestinians have seen it by themselves. They have experienced by themselves. They have experienced the misery of living there. They have experienced the humiliation caused by the army, IDF, and the Israeli army of moving from one spot to another, which usually takes 5 minutes. It could take them 5 hours to move from one spot to another, going from one village to another. So, yes, so that is part of the education too, so that people know that this is they're living in almost in an apartheid kind of conditions, and which is not foreign to the people. We saw that in South Africa, and we've seen it in before. And at the end of the day, people who were resisting, even who were called traitors or terrorists, they come out on the top, and they were the right people for the African people in South Africa. It was not the people who were calling them terrorists were the right ones.
I think a lot of people who, coming out of World War II and looking at a home for Jews who were displaced and a general sense, let's have a safe space for Jews when there is no other safe space in the world. That's when Israel, or at least in 1948, was
so
created.
If you are so kind, you put them in your own house, not to snatch other people's house and put them there.
So
you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying.
I think that if the Britishers and the Americans wanted to do that, or the Europeans wanted to do that, they should have done it in their own. They have land. So if I'm kind to somebody, I'm not going to steal from him and give it to you if you need something. If I want to be kind and I won't give it to you, I'm going to give it from myself. That is the proper way of doing it. So that just the idea, let's take these Jews who have suffered, understandable. We do not deny that. There was great suffering for the Jewish people. But that doesn't mean that you snatch from other people, you steal other people's land and give it to them. Just because you are in power and you're strong.
More after this. The First Look newsletter brings you news headlines from all over Asheville every weekday morning. You can scan it at a glance and see if there's something you've missed or just need to know more about. There are no ads disguised as stories, just the headlines in a quick, easy read. Get the First Look newsletter for free at podavl, that's podavl.com/newsletter. Do you think and we're not going to solve this issue right now or go super deep into it, but I do think the heart of the conflict, is there a possibility for a home for both in that region of the Middle East? And I think the two-state solution has been talked about for decades, and a shared Jerusalem. Is that impossible? Is that just something that just is not tenable from an Islamic standpoint, from the Palestinian
standpoint of view, it is not impossible. But I don't see that coming from the Israel at this present. And if you listen to some of the presidents, even if you listen to Trump, or even if you listen to Obama, they have clearly said that Netanyahu is not interested in a Palestinian state.
If you take Netanyahu out of the equation and just take maybe a predominant, a majority of Jews would want to see.
That is the most common solution which has been propagated by the powers of the world, and I think it is possible. But I think the problem is that if we are not objective and if we are not just, and I meant by Americans because I'm an American too, and Europeans, if we are not objective and if we are not just to both sides, then that solution will not come through, and that's why it has not happened.
Let me ask you, Imam, is there a danger of people conflating Hamas with Palestinians, with people who practice Islam? What is your thought and position about where Hamas is, and at least in America, people maybe not understanding about the relationship between Hamas and the larger Islamic public?
Actually, I want to talk with you about the point of view of Islam. From our Prophet, peace be upon him, time, when he came to Medina, it's the city in Saudi Arabia, when he immigrated from Mecca to Medina, there's guests come to Medina, and actually they shared each other with everything. And you can just imagine that when he came to Medina, there were many Arab tribes, non-Muslims, many Jewish tribes, non-Muslims, and we have the majority now, they are Muslims. How they live together in peace. You have the right to do everything you want in trading, even in worshipping, even about your church. or everything you want to do it. Just respect the rule, the law. This is what you have to do. So it's easy. Just be justice, as my brother said here, Dr. Khalid. Just be justice, be fair, and you will find the peace. Imagine yourself, my roots from Palestine, from Hebron, Al-Khalil. Just imagine in 1967, my father and his family, and my mom and her family, all of them, they were kicked out from Palestine to Jordan. Just put yourself in their position. How is your feel? You will find it injustice.
That's how your family became in Jordan, was
Yes.
being kicked out of Hebron.
Yes, and Jerusalem.
And Jerusalem. Do you think Jerusalem is really the crux of all of this? That if there was a way for Palestinians and Israelis, for Jews and Muslims to share Jerusalem, would that be the key to ending this thousands years war?
The whole land is becoming an issue because everybody's not going to be able to live in Jerusalem, right?
They may not live in Jerusalem, but it is seen as iconic.
Jerusalem is iconic because it is very sacred to the Muslims. They have the third holiest place for the Muslims.
Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Everything is there.
And the Masjid Al-Aqsa Mosque, that's the third holiest place after Mecca and Medina for the Muslims. And then don't count the Christians out. Christians have a very big stake there too. So I think they should be able to have a share too.
So it's certainly much more complicated than simply Jews and Muslims.
Yeah, and I think they could share that. But as I said, everybody's not going to be living in Jerusalem. For Palestinians, it becomes a matter of their land, of their farms, of their houses. It's just that everything is being taken away.
What is the role of local Muslims, local people who practice in your faith, to help present a salve over this conflict?
I think the role is that all people should be educated, and they should, once they're educated, they should ask their representatives to enforce a just solution.
What would be that just solution in your eyes?
Look, the just solution would be that people who have their lands, they should go back to their homes, right? Would that not be a just solution? If there's going to be two states, then there should be two states based on some equality and some justice. But if you try to be unjust and force the solution for, it might last 6 months, 1 year, but it's going to be, we've seen that 75 years. It has escalated. It hasn't gone away, and it will not go away.
Imam, what would you like our community at large to know about what your teachings are telling you, how people should react locally, if there is any messages that you want beyond your khutbah?
Our Islam is lifestyle. It's not just inside the masjid, the mosque. It's lifestyle. It's a practicing, it's behaviors and morals we have to treat with all people, with all of our teachings in Islam. Some Muslims, they don't actually follow the exact teachings of Islam. For this, sometimes you can see some bad behaviors. For example, we can't consider ISIS as a Muslims. They claim that themselves they are Muslims, but their actions, it's against the Islam. This is not Islam, and this is not the Muslims' behaviors and deeds. We can't call that Al-Qaeda, they are Muslim. We can't call them non-Muslims, but they don't understand the exact teachings of Islam. If you want to see the right point of view of Islam, just follow the teachings of Islam from Quran and the Sunnah, which is the teachings, sayings, and speech and deeds of our Prophet, peace be upon him. Islam in this land for 1400 years ago, and you can make any research in the history, even in the books of the non-Muslims who talking actually in open mind about Islam, you will find none spot in any place and in any time that Islam ruled these places, and you will find that injustice in these places or in these times. Always Islam following the justice.
You mentioned that ISIS is not, you mentioned Al-Qaeda is not. Do you also extend that to Hamas, that they are not Muslims?
I told you, even if I said ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they don't follow the exact ruling of Islam, but I can't call them, they are non-Muslims. They are Muslims, but they don't follow the exact teachings of Islam.
I see.
They're following the understanding of their desires and whims.
Would you extend that same sentiment to Hamas?
Let me ask you that question.
Yeah, sure.
A question for a question.
Yeah.
Do people who are occupied, do they have the right to resist?
Oh, of course.
Is there a UNO or is there a world order where there's people who are occupied, they have the right to resist?
Of course. But resist can be interpreted in many different ways and can be expressed in many different ways. You talked about the protest in downtown. That's resisting.
Yes. So I think if killing of innocent people from either side is obviously not acceptable to anybody. Innocent people, okay, kids, women, whoever they are. I think that's below humanity. We have to respect that. But so from that point of view, yes, it's anybody who's doing that, it's not, even in whatever shape and form, it's not acceptable. But at the same time, there is going to be, for the since 2008, or since Gaza has been under control of Hamas, if you look at it, every day there are people are killed, every day. So you can't expect people that you keep killing them, and whenever they react to tell them, oh, they're anti-Semite, they're terrorist. There is going to be some sort of a reaction from people who are being treated that badly. So I think that's where we have to understand that. But at the same time, we cannot, say that the fact that children and women are being killed, that they're justifiable.
Even men, they're civilians. People talk about women and children.
I think those are usually the number ones which come up, because I think
they embody the innocent.
Yeah. Those usually, because I think the men may be fighting, or they may be resisting, and they may fight.
But I just thought it was interesting that when you brought up, Imam, when you brought up ISIS and Al-Qaeda, I think a lot of people think those are the terrorists, quote unquote, of yesteryear from 9/11 and that vapors of that, and that Hamas, people know that they carried out this attack on October 7th. And I was just wondering if you see them in the same light as they are Muslims, but not following the exact teachings of the Quran. Would you extend that in the way that you said that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were?
Matt, that's right. Yeah. Actually, you will not find any Muslim support the word of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. But now you will find many people around the world, even non-Muslims, sometimes they call themselves Hamas. Why do you think that?
Oh, I didn't know that. Why is that?
Why do you think that? Or at least we are Gaziyin. We are Gazis, even if they don't say.
Gazans, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let us leave the nickname. Now, what is your task if there's anyone attacked your family, your babies, your men, your women, your other people? What is your task in this? Now you can see some Jewish people now here in the United States and around the world, they refused the behaviors of Israeli.
Yeah.
I mean, we had on the march there were several Jewish people there.
Oh, I'm sure there were.
There were several of them.
And let's be clear, even within Judaism, there's a big divide.
Our support is for the Palestinian people. We are not necessarily standing here and supporting PLO or Hamas or anything. We are here to support the innocent people, Palestinians who are being killed, who are being butchered. They're not Hamas. And their children are not less than American children or Jewish children. So where is the condemnation of the Israel? Have killed more than 10,000.
I do think there is a condemnation, but I think people disregard the previous 75 years. They say Hamas started this.
Yeah.
People see just what happened on October 7th and saying Hamas escalated this, and not Jews, but Israel's government is responding to that. I think that's when people want to be selective about looking at a window of time. So when you're saying about the response, I do think there is a global condemnation. I know that there's a rabbi in town who wants to reach out to you. It's a very progressive congregation, wants to get something going. Do you see a role here in our small little community for the Islamic Center of Asheville and for local Jewish leaders to come together in a certain solidarity around the human rights abuses that are happening around this?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there is nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
It's all possible. But I think the most important message from the Islamic Center to all Jewish and all Christians is that there should be no violence against each other.
Yes.
We as a community need to live as a community. We need to respect each other. The conflict is not here physically, but yes, there's going to be conflict of opinions, but it should stay to that extent and should not be propagated beyond that.
Is there anything we have not talked about around your congregation, about activities coming up, anything public, anything that you want people who are not part of the Islamic Center to understand about your people and your faith or just your activities here?
I think for the public, I would say, look, everybody is welcome, especially on Fridays when we have our congregational prayers. We used to have a lot of churches, even some synagogue and some Unitarian churches. Their students, they have come and visited us. Some of the newer teachers who were training, they come here and we welcome them. And our message is that of just peace, educate peace, and let people make their own decisions. And there is no hidden agenda here. There is no propagating of any sort of violence in this masjid. And our main activity is to teach our community about Islam and how to cope with these newer situations, these tougher situations, and these new in the modern times.
Imam, I want to ask you to close this conversation. Do you feel at home here?
Too much.
Too much? Yeah. How so? What do you mean?
Too much. Actually, I feel more better. As I told you, with neighbors, friends, Muslims and non-Muslims, I'm walking in my complex, always, hello, how are you doing? How are you? Good morning, good evening. I feel in peace. Yeah, this is nice environment actually for me and for my family, my kids with me. Both my children, they are in high school, and I have one in elementary school here in Oakley. They are teaching in peace and in nice environment actually. Yeah, I liked living here in Asheville.
I want to thank our guests today, Imam Nasser Ostah and community leader Khalid Bashir. Our conversation happened inside the Islamic Center of Asheville. My conversation with leaders in Asheville's Jewish community happens over 2 parts, coming up this Wednesday and Friday. If you value the Overlook's place in Asheville's media landscape, please consider joining dozens of others who are supporting the show through my Patreon crowdfunding page. Become a member for as little as $5 a month. Visit patreon.com/The Overlook Podcast. Our First Look newsletter gives you just a handful of daily headlines from around the local media landscape to get you on your morning. We also have a weekly newsletter devoted to all things The Overlook that hits you every Friday. Both are free and available at podavl.com/newsletter. Our theme music for The Overlook, Maker's Song, comes courtesy of the Asheville band The Resonant Rogues. The Overlook is a production of Podcast Asheville. New episodes come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on any social media channel at AVL Overlook. And I'll see you on the next episode of The Overlook with Matt Peiken.
Curious how the word y'all has conquered the English-speaking world? Ever wonder why there are so many dollar stores and what they mean to the American landscape? I'm Anissa Khalifa, host of the new podcast, The Broadside, from North Carolina Public Radio. We explore stories at the heart of the American South. Each week, we go beyond the headlines and cover a single topic that impacts our region and explain how it reverberates across the country. Follow The Broadside wherever you get your podcasts.